So as I start today off, we're going to restring the Epiphone inspired by Gibson Custom Dove. We're going to restring it with 13 gauge strings because I want to give it the same setup that the 63 Dove has. Now, with that in mind, I wanted to take a moment and take a look at some of the differences on these guitars. And one of them is painstaking right there. These headstocks are not the same size. The Epiphone is about ½ an inch thinner than the Gibson. Now that said, there's something that I did not come to realize until I started doing the filming for this video. And that is that on here we have a 1.69 nut width. And I genuinely thought that this one was a 1 3/4. But what you're going to find out is, measuring from the outside edges of the neck, this is a 1.70. And if you measure from the nut, it's a 1.68. And the 1.68 nut width is probably because that nut, if I'm remembering correctly, when my dad owned the guitar, was changed in the late 80s when the leveling of the frets happened. With that in mind, that would explain why he went with a bone nut and a slightly smaller nut width. Now that said, fretboards themselves actually measure almost exactly the same. So I am blown away by the fact that this guitar is actually true to the 1963 spec. And that also means that the guitar, the modern Gibson, is not true to the original spec. So that's interesting that the one that they consider the modern/original collection Gibson Dove has a wider nut width than an actual 1963. And I'm pretty sure 63 and 62 share the same nut width because they are only a year apart from each other in the first 2 years of the Dove. So with that in mind, an interesting side note that this Epiphone is actually more true to the 1963 than that Gibson that is more modern day. So anyway, and that also points out something else. This 63 Dove and the 63 Dove Reissue by Epiphone have a nut width that is closer to the nut width of a R8 and R9 RO Reissue Les Paul. So they all share a nut width very within like a thousandths, of an inch, hundredths of an inch sometimes, hundredths to a thousandths of an inch of each other. And that's interesting because, like I say, I always presumed that Gibson nut widths were 1 3/4, but that is not a correct spec. 1.69 is the correct spec. 1.68, 1.69. The R8 had a 1.68 and the R9 had a 1.69 or maybe 1.67, something like that. But they were both right there with 168, 167, 169. So, interesting thought. But this Epiphone is actually more true. And it also carries the Clues and waffle backs, which the original collection of the modern Dove does not. So and maybe that's one of the things that goes on is the modern Doves just don't carry certain aspects. The tuner keys are the same, but the Grovers don't match the Clues and waffle backs of the originals. So with no further ado, it is time to get the Epiphone onto the workbench and start putting some new strings on it. So while filming today, I am going to condition this fretboard. It looks pretty good very few tooling marks. I mean, just overall, a really good representation of what Epiphone can do when they put their mind to it. So the guitar itself looks pretty good, but it's dry. It's just really dry. And when you get really up close, you can see how dry it really is. So we'll be conditioning this fretboard during the process. So look at how much different that looks. I'm here to tell you that's real rosewood, and it is 100% better than it was. This streak right here came out in that conditioning process because it all looked that color before now. And then this streak down here as well popped up during the conditioning process. So, and the acrylic, which maybe it is mother of pearl, but no matter how you look at it, these inlays came to life with some conditioner on them. So I am very pleased with the way that came out, and I am here to tell you. So this time I used the PRS fretboard conditioner. This stuff is really thin, so it tries to go everywhere, but it is good at sinking in and it works really well. So this is what we will be using for today's upgrade, the D'Addario Phosphor Bronze 13 to 56 gauge strings. And I'm going to be really interested to see if I need to cut that nut to fit these bigger strings, but it seemed like there was a little bit of a gap on there, so I'm going to see if it sits on top or if it sits inside that nut, because I'm really curious as to whether it'll fit exactly correct. So common sense says most of these guitars would be cut this way, but it's just worth noting that the E string and A string do fit inside the nut on these guitars. Now, that said, the E string sits perfect. The A string is a little bit proud, so it does stick up just a little bit more than the rest of them, but the rest of them are ideal cut for 13 gauge strings. So at the end of the day, this really will hold a set of 13 gauges, and this will probably work its way down. You could cut this nut a little bit more to be able to facilitate that. I'm not going to, because I'm interested to see what it does. I'm anxious to see. It doesn't seem like it made that big of a difference of when it comes to the actual, oh, nope, there it is. It's set down now. So this is now flush and matches the same, fret depth or, elevation of all the rest of them. So you can put 13 gauges in the nut on this new inspired by Gibson custom Dove. So as I sit here and tune this guitar for the first time after its little change in strings, I'm noticing that it is 100% a different feel. Just in the, like I say, it's just the strings feel different. I don't know how to describe it other than it just feels different. But it was amazing how easily it took to the strings. Like, I was impressed. I was expecting it to give me a little bit more problems than this. So, very content with the idea that this is going to work out to be a pretty decent little comparison between two guitars that are very much cut from the same mold, even though they are, 60 years apart from each other. this is going to get to a point where it's kind of redundant. So I'm going to push pause again and do this. But like I say, this guitar already feels really good. And the neck doesn't, like I say, I'm going to check the relief when I get finished with this. But looking at it from right here, this one doesn't seem to have made any difference. And like I said, the nut itself holds these strings. None of them sit proud now. So that'll be interesting. All right, be back in a moment. All right, so before I do any more stuff here, this is the first time I'm playing it with, after getting the strings tuned. So initial reaction here. Impressive. And I'm going to tell you, we're going to do a side-by-side in a moment, but yeah. Time to cut the string leads off and make sure it's in tune after that. So be right back. So before I go into playing on the 63 and comparing it, I just wanted to give this one a little play through the Fender amp, because the other one does not have that option. So this is with the mic over in front of the Fender amp. So here we go. Okay, that sounds good. And we're gonna do a comparison later of this guitar now with the 13 gauges on it versus the Hummingbird that has 13 gauges on it, plus go back again with the Dove with the 12 gauges on it, the modern Dove, because that's impressive. And I'm a little blown away. I'm a little starstruck about the whole, my allegiance to American-made guitars is suddenly being questioned. All right, now let's get to the fun part. This is where we take and we put the 63 against the 63 reissue. So if you're new to the channel, this is a 1963 Gibson Dove. This was purchased by my dad, brand new in 1963. He bought it, and during Vietnam, his mom took it over, and when he got back, it was there waiting for him. This one is equipped with the Clusen waffle backs, which was standard. This one has the Brazilian rosewood because it is from that era. They just built them that way in 1963. This guitar is equipped with 13 gauge strings, and it has been since the 80s. It was set up to hold 13 gauge strings by a luthier named Kevin Perry from a place called Great Southern Music just outside of Houston, Texas. This guitar has lived most of its life in its case. There is a little bit of checking, as you can see on some locations around there, but for the most part, this guitar has been pretty well maintained the way any guitar should be maintained, and like I say, it's a cool guitar. Maple back and sides, spruce top. No, nothing torrefied because this is back from the times when they just made them out of wood. It does have something that the modern one does not, the reissue does not, and that is, and not all of these had these two pneumatic bridges. They were kind of problematic back in the day. So a lot of the guitars were made without them. This one was made with it, and it has been adjusted 2 or 3 times over the years, most notably for the 13 gauge strings when this was redone. The nut was changed when the frets were leveled, right? So these frets were leveled in the 80s, and the nut was done at the same time. Dad didn't keep the receipt for it, so I can't tell you exactly when. I just know it happened. That said, this guitar has a sound that is distinctly Gibson. And it is incredibly easy to play. The frets have been leveled. They're actually showing some wear in the cowboy cord area. And at some point I will probably have them redone, and probably the nut redone as well, because the rest's just a little tiny bit off of center. But overall, I took it to Gibson just recently, and we talked about doing a full fret and nut redone on it, as well as setting it up again and making sure that everything is set for the right relief to be done for the 13 gauge strings. Neck is highly polished, but not worn through. Never been repaired. It's always been just exactly like that. But this guitar is easy to enjoy because it just plays. and it rings for a very long time. And now the 63 Dove reissue. All right. Now what you can't hear in the room is the sound that the Dove from 1963 makes is fuller. It rings a little louder, and it's got probably everything to do with the fact that it is 63 years old, and the crystallization and everything that's happened in the wood has happened in a way that makes it do what it does. It vibrates in a way that is only duplicable by actual aging. The torrefication process on this is great. This guitar is a good enough representation of the 63 Dove that you could buy this for $1,500 and be happy with it, I think. I would be happy with it if I didn't have the 63 Dove. And to be honest with you, it makes me question whether or not I need the Gibson USA Dove from 2022. But deep down inside, I'm probably not going to get rid of that one either. But this guitar really is a great playing guitar, and it feels so comfortable. And I know what it is. It's the fact that it's got a neck profile that feels like this one. I mean, these neck profiles are within millimeters of each other. Just thousandths of an inch probably. But there's something about the way this guitar there's something about that one that just plays really well. And when you pick up the 63, it chugs differently, but it's 62 years old. I mean, so there is something to it. There is something to an old guitar, especially in an acoustic, because of the way the wood is put together, the way that everything is done. I mean, these guitars from 1963 were made with different wood. They were made at a time when the wood was different. And so it is going to be really difficult to duplicate that. That said, the Epiphone is a really, really good guitar. And if you're looking for a guitar to go out and play and get a nice, full, deep sound out of without spending $4,000 to buy it, get yourself a set of 13 gauge strings and one of these Epiphone inspired by Gibson custom 63 Doves and be happy, because I genuinely am interested in how this guitar is going to age. Because if it does age as well as it could age, that's going to be a very compelling argument for their quality. Like I say, the Gibson, I don't know if the Gibson Custom Shop actually does any kind of inspecting of these guitars or has quality control on them, or if it's just Gibson USA that does quality control on them. But the Epiphone inspired by Gibson Custom is very much a compelling thought towards having a guitar that is less than $2,000 and able to play really, really well. And I'm a little blown away by that, because I do love this guitar. And being able to pick this guitar up and get a similar tone out of it. And then being able to reach in here and add a pickup. That's nice. So there you go. I don't know how much the 63 Dove costs. It was brand new. It was a $300 guitar. So $1963. It was not very expensive, but they're selling anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000 on Reverb. So let's just call it $1,500 to $7,500. Is it 5 times better? I'm not completely sure it is. I'm not. I genuinely feel like if you're looking for a guitar to go out and play and enjoy and really just have this one, the Epiphone comes with a case. It comes with a pickup. It does everything with 13 gauge strings that I think a Gibson Dove would do. And I gotta tell you, I'm impressed by that. I think that that's a big win for Epiphone, and it is going to make some people really happy, because I think that these guitars are going to make it accessible for people to have really nice instruments. So kudos to Epiphone, kudos to Gibson for wanting to reissue a 63 Dove. And I'm interested to see if we wind up with a USA version of a 63 reissue, because that guitar right there and its existence means that they've got the measurements to reissue this guitar. And I'm here for it. I will gladly buy the, Gibson USA / Gibson custom version of a 63 reissue. I'm going to be looking out for it because I'm anxious. So until next time, just know 1,500 versus 7,500-ish. And which one do you want to get? How much money do you have to spend? Take care.